us to transition towards the issue of climate change and how conservation comes in as a crisis discipline, okay? Let us first try to recall what are the factors that compose our climate, okay? So, as we try to remember, or as we can recall, one of the main factors in our climate or affecting our climate is the latitude of an area, okay? Now, what is latitude again? It is the area's northern or southern distance from our equator, okay? So, that means that with different latitude, okay, the amount of solar radiation that is received by an area also differs, okay? Solar radiation or solar energy, okay? So those located at our equator, the regions located at our equator, receive a 90-degree angle of solar radiation. So direct yung nare-receive nila. And so they receive the highest amount. And those that are located at a higher or lower portion of our globe receives an oblique angle. So dahil oblique yung angle ng pagtama ng ating solar radiation sa kanila, they receive less solar radiation. Okay? And this uneven heating of our surface now contributes to differences also in air pressure. Bakit? So when air is warmed, it is less dense and it rises. Okay? And cold air, diba, is denser, so it sinks. Now, when air molecules are heated on the Earth's surface, it warms, okay? It rises, and because of the movement of the Earth, it moves laterally, and then it cools, and then sinks. And voila, you have your convection cells, okay? So, one of the popular or well-known pair of convection cells is located at your equator, okay? At your equator, and this is called the Hadley cells. Now, the point at which these Hadley cells meet, okay, that is called your intertropical convergence zones. It's where their intertropical convergence zone, it's where they meet, okay? Now, this is the area, again, between these two Hadley cells, okay? Convection cells, ayan. And why is this important, okay? So, this is important because this is where your trade winds from your northern and southern hemispheres meet, okay? So, that means they raise now the warm, buoyant, diba? Less dense, and humid air from the equator, and then as it warms, rises, it cools, and not only cools, but also condenses, okay? And now, this causes so much rainfall and thunderstorms at the equatorial regions now, okay? So that is why we have such a climate here, okay? Now, because climate is such a complex system, okay, composed of these different elements. So latitude is just one of these factors that affect climate. So there are so many other elements at play here. So we can expect that when any of these components are altered, are changed, there could be drastic consequences now at play. And it could manifest decades later, okay? Decades later. These complications could manifest, these feedback mechanisms and their impacts could manifest later, okay? And even accumulate. Okay, so this continuous progress from the industrial age, from the industrial revolution of human society, diba? It brings with it increasing pollution, carbon emissions, and this just keeps accumulating. And now it is known as our greenhouse gases. That also impacts now or even exacerbate now global warming. Okay? Now here we could see different impacts of climate change. And I would like to show you some of NASA's recording satellite images, okay, throughout the years. So here we could see several climate change impacts. One would be sea level rise. And this is caused by the melting of ice caps, the expansion of water at warm temperature. Syempre, we can expect that as ice melts, ice caps melt, okay? And as temperature rise, lalo na sa ating oceans, water expands with it. Now, the melting of glacial ice and the appearance of soil and vegetation in these areas decreases the reflectivity of ice on solar radiation. Therefore, it only encourages more melting because it increases solar radiation absorption. Okay? This then increases the absorption of solar radiation all the more and warms surfaces even at high latitudes. Permafrost ice is also melting, and this releases methane gas, okay, a greenhouse gas, leading to further global warming. Sea level has risen to 23 centimeters in the last century, but could even double due to global warming, putting half of the Earth's population at a vulnerable state. This is because higher sea level means greater wave energy and increased coastline erosion. With a receding shoreline and stronger waves, coastal flooding increases in frequency and intensity, and storm surges have more casualties. And we have seen this through the years. I am from Cagayan Valley, and we have seen this happen. There is so much flooding that has happened in the past 2 years. And flood levels that has never been seen in decades has happened. And number 2, these are just 2 of the impacts, okay? There are much more. Number 2 would be biological diversity. This warming temperature on land and ocean, diba, occurring and affecting and producing droughts and floods, the increased acidification of oceans, and these positive and negative feedback mechanisms at play, these accompany these have serious consequences on diversity. We are losing so much more than we know. Again, diba, species are adapted to their biomes, to their niches. Okay? And these drastic changes, it makes them difficult to adapt immediately. In addition to that, these impacts are further increased, worsened, okay, by pollution, by the already present pollution, deforestation, okay? So, you can expect that an organism's niche, biome, food source, okay, these are all threatened, and its overall functioning, how it plays its role in the ecosystem, is further at risk. It is further threatened. The ability of nature to recover and adapt could not keep up with all these changes, with such drastic, frequent, and rapid changes. So according to E.O. Wilson in 1992, the most compelling reason for the broadening of goals is that, unlike the rest of science, the study of biodiversity has a time limit. Species are disappearing at an accelerating rate through human action, primarily habitat destruction but also pollution and the introduction of exotic species into residual natural environments. Every kind of organism has reached this moment in time by threading one needle after another, throwing up brilliant artifices to survive and reproduce against nearly impossible odds. And too many changes at such a fast rate cannot be handled by life. Yes, nature has withstood changes, okay? Nature can recover, yes, but not this fast enough. So because nature cannot adapt fast enough, conservation is now considered as a crisis discipline, wherein we do not have anymore any time to collect everything, to collect all the facts, to collect all relevant information for all these species. So that means that each decision we make towards managing our environment, towards managing these protected areas, is a risk. Okay? And we can only move forward. That means, kapag may nagkaroon ng problema dun sa decision natin, we can still correct it later. But for now, what is urgent? What is of priority? So yun yung mga kailangan nating tingnan. For instance, in a polluted lake or river, we first try to identify the threats. Okay, bakit siya polluted? And we try to prevent that. And now, kung ano man yung mga mag-a-arise pa na problems, we will get to that. We will cross the bridge when we get there. Ganun siya. We cannot collect every relevant information at this moment before we make a decision. And that's why it's a crisis discipline. Okay? Just like how surgeons approach a certain operation, a certain treatment, okay? Like for instance, cancer, okay? And a tumor, okay? They cannot be at a 100% sure na stance or certainty or level, di ba? Level of certainty. So, ganun din sa conservation. It is a crisis discipline because we cannot expect ourselves to be sure enough with these changes that are happening. And it is very rapid. So we also need to fasten our pace, quicken our pace, okay? So here is a diagram showing how we should approach conservation. It should be multidisciplinary. So this is a figure showing how conservation biology should be synthetic, okay, and should be multidisciplinary in structure, okay. According to Selay in 1985, it takes many of its questions, techniques, and methods from a broad range of facts, and not all are biological. Why? Because you have to include the social system there. Kaya nga siya socio-ecological system. Hindi lang siya ecological. We need to include our community there. This illustration shows the artificiality of the dichotomy, di ba, between theoretical and applied disciplines. Ayan, makikita natin siya dyan. And it also shows how interdependent all these sciences are, be it biological or social in discipline. If you can see here, di ba, you have your management or your applied types, you have forestry, fisheries, wildlife, while you have your theoretical. You have your population genetics, population biology, evolution, and of course, systematics. And you can see how important knowing your physical environment, knowing your social environment, and the role of policymakers here, because we need to implement the solutions that we have for a certain area. It will all be in vain, di ba? Yung mga efforts natin, kung hindi naman natin siya maiko-communicate, mai-implement, mailalagay sa planning, okay? Ayan. And to tell you the truth, there are so many environmental databases that are already available online, okay? They are open source, or they may also be commercial, okay? So you get them via subscription. Ayan. And these global databases can be used for environmental projects, for mitigation, for planning, okay? They are available to help practitioners, non-scientists even, to identify and look at biodiversity impacts, okay? They can also help practitioners choose what method could be effective in intervening, okay, in these areas, okay, in these priority areas, okay. Technology is very much available, okay, for us to use, and that's such a good thing. Okay, now there is automated detection and classification even of species, habitats, okay? And that is what I'm trying to study at the moment. How I'm going to classify a marine habitat through just satellite images, okay? And even just with these images, audio recordings, okay? When we input this, we use machine learning. They can be used to overcome all these man-hours na tinatawag. Yung problem of having so much needed time to classify, okay? To analyze such an amount of collected data, okay? So, hindi na natin kailangan masyado ng manpower. Supervision na lang, okay? So through these automations, okay, through machine learning, ayan, through fixed or even mobile survey technologies, it is already easier for us to identify, okay, kung meron mang endangered species dyan, based lang sa camera captures, okay, so or audio recordings even of bird sounds, bat, okay? Ayan, so what do? We use algorithms. Ayan, so hindi na lang siya abstract. Okay, hindi na lang abstract ang calculus or the use of functions. We can now readily classify camera trap images of birds, okay, of mammals, diba? Identify different habitat types using remote sensing imagery. Ayan, so sobrang dami ng pwede nating gamitin. Classify even audio recordings, okay, of different animals. You have birds, bats, okay, primates, okay, all these vocalizations, diba? You can all input this using these present algorithms to be able to detect a species, classify them, okay, monitor the populations in that area. And we can do this at a temporal scale. We can try to analyze it temporally. Ibig sabihin, pwede na natin siyang i-monitor. Okay, yearly, monthly, okay, what have you. Ayan. So, we can even detect invasive species, di ba? Kung hindi siya native dun sa area, pwede na rin natin siyang ma-detect. So, of course, we have to make sure primarily that we put in the right data. Syempre, di ba? Kasi these algorithms will only work in our favor or will only work objectively if we have good data. Ayan. So, this interdisciplinary approach is very much possible. Okay? And this should be the approach in managing ecosystems and in conserving these socio-ecological systems. Yan. So what then is the role of systematics in conservation? But for us to be able to fully define the role of systematics in conservation, we have to try to recall what is systematics again. Diba? We said it is different from taxonomy. Yes? Ayan. So, remember the 3 pillars in systematics. Diba? You have your taxonomy, your phylogeny, and your evolution. So, hindi na lang siya classification, identification. It also involves the history of the organism, how it was able to adapt, okay, what factors affected its adaptation through time. And this could give us a clue in the ways that we could conserve it. Ano ba yung mga situations, conditions na pwede nating gamitin, okay, for it to survive pa. Okay? Yan. So, what should we ensure for its survival? Yan. And of course, we also have to input its modes of adaptation. Kung paano pa siya makakapag-adapt. We have to project that, to model that in the future. Ayan. So, it is very much important that we acknowledge the biology of the organism. And that's where systematics comes in. Ayun. So, in the Philippine setting, diba? This country is tropical, okay? It is located close to the equator, and it has about 2.5 million square kilometers, okay, of territory. And its population as of 2020 is 109 million. Yan. So, tayo yung isa sa mga pinaka-ecologically mega-diverse countries. Okay? And this is from CBD 2021. We have about 53,000 species. And out of these 53,000 macroscopic species, 11,237 are terrestrial. These include approximately 8,000 species of flowering plants, 1,000 species of ferns, and 800 species of orchids. It has 1,437 species of animal wildlife. In comparison, the country has 14,989 species of marine organisms, and it is the third globally diverse. Okay? Aside from that, we have to remember its geology. Bakit napakadaming species natin kahit maliit lang yung area natin, 'di ba? Because virtually all of the country's islands are of volcanic origin. So as a result, the larger islands are traversed by mountain ranges. And we can try to identify the most significant being Caraballo Mountains, Central Cordillera here, Sierra Madre, and Zambales Mountains. So, as I've said, because you have such different landscapes, you can expect high diversity. It encourages niches, okay, of so many types. And aside from that, we have climate. So climate is also in our favor. Because we're close to the equator, we receive high solar radiation. And our environment is moist and humid. And that encourages so much life. Okay? And because of this, dahil nga halos constant yung climate natin, di ba? Meron lang tayong warm and rainy seasons. Unlike temperate regions where they have 4, hindi siya constantly changing. It encourages rapid na pag-adapt ng mga species na to in different niches, okay? And their survival, okay? Yan. So, dahil nga malapit tayo sa equator, we have so much rainstorms, thunderstorms, ayan, being in the intertropical convergence zone. And this encourages humidity and moistness, ayan, sa environment. And this higher solar radiation combined with these climate factors now results to high productivity. Yan. So, add all these factors to such an archipelagic landscape as ours, and you have now the Philippine endemics. Okay? So endemism is this state of being unique, diba, to a defined geographic location, such as an island, nation, country, or other defined zone. Organisms that are indigenous to a place are not endemic to it if they are also found elsewhere. And we have so much endemic species. Therefore, they are only found here. And to think that we have lost so much habitat, so much forests, and still we are continually finding or discovering these endemic species in our country. So with all these now, what should be our approach moving forward? Yeah. So this is something that I have encountered continuously in masters, okay, this term, as well as an undergrad student in my senior years. And this is the term ridge to reef approach and ecosystem-based management. Okay. So there is a study by Quiros et al. And in 2017, just in 2017, and their study tried to determine how land use could affect land use in terrestrial environments could affect seagrass ecosystems in protected areas. Okay, they did this by looking at the association, by measuring the association of ecological integrity, okay, of seagrass meadows and the adjacent terrestrial environment and the land use practices there. Okay, so they looked at abiotic and biotic variables. Okay, so you have now land use and physicochemical factors as your abiotic conditions, and you also have species richness, seagrass cover, abundance, ganyan, as your biotic variables now. And their result showed that it does not matter whether you have a marine protected area established there, okay? What matters is the absence of man-made or anthropogenic land use perturbations or disturbances. This had the most significant effect on seagrass meadows condition, as shown by their study. Okay, so this is just a study among many, and it shows the connection between the terrestrial and the marine environment. Kaya ridge to reef approach. Okay? And this should be used in coastal conservation. And as we have previously discussed, meron siyang ethical foundation, diba? That we see ourselves as members, okay, of this system and not owners. Ayan. And therefore, we need to consider a holistic approach. Okay? Ayan. So, to take an ecosystem-based approach naman is looking not just at the species, di ba? Kaya nga systematics din. Kaya nga importante din ang systematics kasi hindi lang niya kino-consider yung species mismo, kundi pati yung evolution at yung phylogenetics niya. Ang phylogeny niya, sorry. So, we are no longer just focused on a certain species, okay? But also consider the trophic cascades, di ba? Just like yung nangyari sa mga wolves sa Yellowstone National Park, okay? And aside, di ba, from understanding yung co-evolution ng mga species, di ba? Lalo na sa systematics, we look into this, how species have co-evolved, di ba? Through studying the phylogeny and evolution, okay? Aside from studying the conditions that they were able to thrive in, okay? Katulad ng sabi ko, we can use this to project. We can try to project and present these scenarios at which they need to adapt to. Okay, so we can try to project several environmental scenarios, environmental models ang tawag nila. If we continue at a business as usual or when we conserve. So vis-a-vis. Ayan. So we can try to compare what happens to the environment and to these species when we continue business as usual or we continue to pollute, we continue to dump waste, unfiltered waste. Okay, we continue to cut down trees here in this area or when we conserve it. Yan. So, diba, we can try to answer through systematics, through statistics as well, with this business as usual scenarios and with conservation scenarios. How will this ecosystem progress in the future? Okay? And this could help, diba? Katulad ng sabi natin kanina, these are all in vain without implementation. And so, these data could then supplement future management decisions. Okay? So, to quote Barnowski et al. In 2017, rather than attempting to hold ecosystems to an idealized conception of the past, as has been the prevailing conservation paradigm until recently, maintaining vibrant ecosystems for the future now requires new approaches that use both historical and novel conservation landscapes, enhance adaptive capacity for ecosystems and organisms, facilitate connectedness, and manage ecosystems for functional integrity rather than focusing entirely on particular species. Yan. So, in moving forward as well, it is very much important to clearly define our ecosophy or our ecological philosophy, as Arne Naess says it. Okay? So, this is because, according to Dunn and colleagues in 2006, if more than half of the people on Earth find no reason to care about nature, we are all in trouble. Okay? Now, a very much important observation by Miller in 2005 was that conservationists have failed to convey the importance of biodiversity to the general public because we only do it through a cognitive-oriented educational approach. Okay? Hindi na gumagana yung ganitong abstractness Okay? Sa pag-convey ng importance ng biodiversity. Scandrani again, mahilig talaga ako dun sa mga quotes ni Scandrani. Scandrani suggests that as long as conservation biology has this abstract consideration of non-human lives, as long as we try to condense everything, reduce everything to statistics, genetics, numbers, maps, okay, we already see, diba? It's already apparent that this does not lift people's estrangement from nature, yung alienation ng madla, diba, sa environment. Involving people again does not just mean informing them how to rightly manage an area, okay? We need to abandon this attitude. Okay, he even terms it hegemonic. Okay, wherein nature is just a scientific question. We need to localize climate change adaptation dun sa experiences ng community. Okay? Kailangan natin makita base sa kanilang perspective kung ano yung climate change impact sa kanila. And we start from there. Okay? Hindi lang to laboratory question. We need to understand that it is a real life thing. Okay? They are experiences. Sila yung nasa grassroots eh. Sila yung nakaka-experience ng kung ano ang ibig sabihin ng climate change sa kanila. And believe me, they understand. They have seen and experienced the impacts of climate change. We have to stop acting as if everything can just be conveyed through science. Okay? We have to remember that Western scientists, these colonizers, they were not the first of their kind. Okay? Climate scientists were first and foremost indigenous peoples, indigenous communities. They were the first climate scientists, and I claim that. I know that the values have changed throughout the years, and understandably so. It is also for adaptation eh. You know, we need to make trade-offs as well. But then, you know, it's just rightly to put out there, I think, nararapat lang na sabihin that scientists cannot continue to act as if they're the only ones knowledgeable about nature. Diba? You have art, you have film, you have photography, you have music to localize climate change. To reach out, diba? Hindi lang in numbers, hindi lang in graphs. And so, everyone has a role to play in climate change adaptation. Okay? A study in 2015 by Sochok, I don't know if I'm butchering the name, but Sochok and colleagues created this study did this study in 2015, and here they used stakeholder involvement, engagement to inform endangered species management, okay, and to improve conservation of these endangered species. Okay, they worked on rockfishes. Okay, so this study illustrates how species management can be done and is possible in socio-ecological systems. Okay, they provided a framework for such a comprehensive engagement of stakeholders. Pag sinabi nating stakeholders, sila yung una na concerned, sila yung mga directly na naapektuhan. Ayan. So, they put into consideration yung relationship ng mga nasa community, okay, with these endangered species, with these threatened species. Okay? So they incorporated fishing practices before they developed a recovery plan. Ayan. So finally, to sum it all up, I do believe that climate change, the impacts of climate change is a shared experience. And our adaptation as a planet is a shared responsibility.